I regret to interrupt the member. Order. I regret to interrupt the member. However, we have to move on with the questions and the statements. So the member will have approximately 4 minutes after question period when the orders are back before the House. Statements by members, déclaration de députés. The honourable member for St. John's East.
Madam Speaker, we're not sheltered from the gale force winds, the gale force demographic winds faced by Newfoundland and Labrador. To save our ship, our government has partnered with the 4 Atlantic premiers on an Atlantic growth strategy based on 5 important pillars: skilled workforce and immigration, infrastructure, trade and investment, innovation, and clean growth and climate change. The Atlantic growth strategy is working in St. John's East. More infrastructure investment in the last 2 years than the previous 9 years combined. The Atlantic Immigration Pilot Project and the Startup Visa Program for international entrepreneurs. $2 billion over 11 years for trade in Atlantic Canada, and world-leading cold oceans research in partnership with the Ocean Frontier Institute. We do not do this alone. This new collaborative approach relies on strategic partnerships epitomized by PRNL and our Ocean Supercluster team. As we tackle these challenges, all Canadians can be confident that our government knows what's at stake and has all hands on deck. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Madam Speaker, since the summertime, my office has been consistently flooded with concerns regarding this government's marijuana legislation. Among their many concerns, my constituents are especially worried that the legislation does not keep marijuana out of the hands of our children, nor does it adequately address impaired driving. If marijuana is grown in the home, there is little that parents can do to stop their kids, especially teenagers, from accessing it. Furthermore, landlords, real estate associations, insurance companies are concerned with the home grow provisions because of the increased fire hazard and mold growth that comes with these kinds of operations. Law enforcement has asked the Liberal government to slow down, citing a lack of technology that can detect marijuana impairment at the roadside. The Canadian Medical Association and the Canadian Psychiatric Association have said slow down. The Liberals are ignoring Canadians across the board in a race to meet their arbitrary deadline. I urge the government to take a step back, listen to Canadians, and rethink this poorly constructed legislation.
The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Madam Speaker, last week I had the opportunity to attend the 8th Annual Vaughan Chamber of Commerce Women to Women Symposium. The women there were true leaders in business and entrepreneurship, and it was wonderful to hear their shared experiences of breaking gender barriers. The keynote speaker was Deepa Mehta, a woman film director, and the topic of discussion turned to discrimination, sexual harassment, gender-based violence, topics explored in some of her films. It brought to mind that despite the many successes women are achieving in Canada and the world, it's important to remember that there is still much to be done to ensure equality and safety for women and girls. Tomorrow we begin 16 days of activism against gender-based violence with the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. We must remember that gender-based violence disproportionately affects members of marginalized communities and the LGBTQ2 individuals. I urge us all to take action towards creating a world free from violence for all women and girls. We must leave no one behind.
The honourable member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
On any given night in Canada, more than 350 women and children are fleeing domestic violence are turned away because shelters are underfunded and bursting at the seams. Imagine the strength it takes to flee abuse. Imagine the heartbreak of shelter workers having to tell women there is a 6-month waiting list for counselling. It's unacceptable. Violence against women costs Canada $12 billion a year. 1 in 4 women will be victims in their lifetime. Indigenous and disabled women experience a much higher level of violence than anyone else in Canada. We wear orange to honour the United Nations International Day to End Violence Against Women. And we give deepest thanks to shelter operators like Haven Society in Nanaimo. We will keep pressing the Liberal government to turn its feminist words into real action and recommit that Canada's goal must be the eradication of violence against women. We will not.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, our country was built through the determination of men and women investing in the creation of strong and dynamic communities. Recently, two businessmen, including Mr. Ronel Bouchard from Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, acquired 21 regional media throughout Quebec, thus becoming the biggest private owner of regional publications in Quebec. Our regional newspapers are key to the life and development of our communities. They are a vehicle for freedom of expression as well as for informing the public. The newspaper Le Canada Français has been playing this role for 157 years in the riding of Saint-Jean. It is the second oldest French-language newspaper in North America. Madam Speaker, Canada needs innovative entrepreneurs like Mr. Bouchard, citizens who know that a strong country is built on vibrant, informed, and connected communities. Thank you.
Member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Madam Speaker, Canada 150 has been an opportunity to celebrate how far our great nation has come over the past century and a half. In this, our sesquicentennial year, I set out to honour the many unsung heroes in Flamborough-Glanbrook, the community leaders, volunteers and activists that have been a vital part of building a better Canada. 150 outstanding Canadians were honoured in Flamborough-Glanbrook and the Greater Hamilton area during the award ceremonies that took place in October and November at Mount Hope, Bimbrook and Copetown. While these unsung heroes never seek the limelight, there's no doubt to any of us that they are the true nation builders. Farmers, hockey coaches, Lion Club presidents, food drive volunteers, and the list goes on. It is profoundly humbling to see the incredible work of so many outstanding individuals. Madam Speaker, these nation builders are a living example to the very Canadian values of duty, honour, and community, being a good neighbour and a selfless commitment that we celebrate for Canada 150. Congratulations and thank you to everyone in Flamborough-Glanbrook for their nominations and dedication to the community, and congratulations to all the nation builders.
The Honourable Member for Montarville. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last Saturday, Charles Hamelin won the gold medal during the last stage of the World Cup of Skating. We have speed skating in our blood. The city of Saint-Julie built the third skating rink of the family of Charles-François Hire. Through their example, discipline, and determination, the Hamelin family is a model for a whole generation of Quebecers, including the young members of our skating club. The Hamelin brothers will be at the 23rd Winter Olympics, and I hope they come back to Saint-Julie with medals around their necks. Go Team Canada.
The Honourable Member for Eglinton Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to pay tribute to the life of Senator Tobias Verga, the first Filipino-Canadian appointed to the Senate and the first elected to a position in the City of Toronto. Avant qu'il ait commencé sa carrière.
Before he began his career in politics, Senator Verga had a long, distinguished career as a project manager with the Bank of Montreal. He worked for charitable organizations in Canada as well as in the Philippines. He embodied multiculturalism and diversity.
His dedicated work at the Philippine-Canadian Charitable Foundation by working tirelessly as an advocate for the Filipino-Canadian community. In my riding of Eglinton Lawrence, with a considerable Filipino-Canadian population, Senator Verga was deeply respected by our community. I hope all members will join me in mourning the loss of a friend and colleague whose tireless advocacy works and serves as a continued inspiration for us all. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Last week, people along the Iraq-Iran border experienced devastation as a deadly earthquake struck the region. Iran claims more than 1,000 people died and thousands more were injured. The majority of those affected are Kurds living south of the village of Halabja along the border in Rajalat, also known as Kermanshah in Iran. The Kurds were already facing a humanitarian crisis, which now has intensified as a result of the earthquake. They are in dire need of basic life necessities such as water, food, medicine, clothing, and access to electricity, all of which they are being denied as a result of Iran's refusal to accept international assistance. The need is immediate and visible online, with survivors posting videos of collapsed buildings and bodies in the streets. Rare street protests against the Iranian government have drawn attention to the slow response. Canada must press Iran to stop discriminating against its own citizens and provide timely, life-saving assistance in the face of disaster. We share in the grief of affected families, and let's offer that helping hand in their time of need. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Charlottesville, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingway.
Madam Speaker, while Canadians have removed their poppies, we must always remember the sacrifices of our brave men and women. Recently, I had the honour of travelling with my fellow colleagues to attend the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Passchendaele. Witnessing how the people of France and Belgium remembered and honoured the sacrifices our country made during the First World War, and standing on the hallowed ground where the Canadian Corps advanced across the valley, then a treacherous morass, and captured and held the Passchendaele Ridge, was a moving experience and one that I will continue to remember during my service for our brave men and women in my role on the Veterans Affairs Committee. And as a physician, it was especially poignant to see the memorial of John McCrae, himself a physician, and read his immortal words in Flanders Fields that continue to impact us today. I would like to thank Veterans Affairs Canada, the organizers of our delegation, the Anavets Assiniboia Unit 283, and the Charles Wood Legion 100 for the articles given to the Ypres Historical Society and the people of Ypres who welcomed our delegation with open arms. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Thank you. Canuck Place is British Columbia's recognized hospice for children, devoted to the lives of children who live with life-limiting conditions and to supporting the hundreds of families since 1995 who believe that whether life is measured in weeks or months, all children deserve the opportunity to learn, to develop, and to grow. Farther afield, the 7 summits refers to the 7 highest mountain peaks in the world on 7 continents. To summit all 7 is considered a mountaineering accomplishment, obviously. And so, on November 3rd of this year, Liz Rose from West Vancouver became the youngest Canadian in history at the age of 26 to summit all 7 peaks in pursuit of her goal to raise $200,000 for Canuck Place. To Liz, her perseverance represents the bravery of the children at Canuck Place. She carried their flag to the top, and they were with her. On behalf of all members of Parliament, we're very grateful and very proud of Canuck Place and of Liz Rose and her family. Thank you.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Madam Speaker, in Lakeland, Frog Lake Energy Resources Corp. is First Nations owned and operated. It's built homes, community centres, and increased education programs through responsible oil production. This week, Mikisew Cree First Nation and Fort McKay First Nation reached a historic deal with Suncor that will provide revenues to each community for 25 years. But the Liberals' anti-energy agenda is limiting prosperity for First Nations. Now the First Nations-led $16 billion Eagle Spirit pipeline is at risk. 30 First Nations across BC and Alberta support it, but the Liberals' tanker ban threatens it. They killed Northern Gateway, which most First Nations supported. First Nations in the area actually opposed the tanker ban, but the Liberals never asked them. A former chief from BC says the myth that more First Nations oppose energy than actually do limits opportunities for communities and keeps people in poverty. A Northern premier says the Liberals' drilling ban took away hope for long-term healthy living. The Liberals should support Métis and First Nations who have developed resources responsibly for thousands of years.
The honourable member for Oakville North Burlington.
Madam Speaker, every year we recognize 16 days of activism against gender-based violence to reflect on the impact of gender-based violence on individuals, families, and communities. Status of Women Canada will be joining the Canadian Football League at the Grey Cup this weekend to share the importance of taking action. This year's theme is My Actions Matter, and all Canadians can make a personal pledge to help end gender-based violence. You can take the pledge at women.gc.ca or at Lansdowne Park on game day, where I will proudly be wearing my double blue to support the Toronto Argonauts. Canadians across the country can show their support by joining the conversation online using the hashtag MyActionsMatter. The Grey Cup remains Canada's most watched sporting event, with 4.3 million Canadians watching last year. I would love to see this many and more Canadians stand up and pledge their support to end gender-based violence. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. November 25th is the International Day to End Violence Against Women and Children. According to UN figures, approximately 1 woman out of 5 between the ages of 15 and 49-year-old have been the victim of physical or sexual violence. If a woman is Indigenous in Canada, her risk is 3 times higher of suffering assaults than that of a non-Indigenous woman. Slowly, we've seen a change in culture with respect to allegation of assaults against women, and we have to continue that change. Over the next 15 days, we have to talk about this issue, talk about the help available to women if they have been assaulted, and educate men from a very young age so that violence against women is a thing of the past. This is also an opportunity to remember the Polytechnique shooting, wear a white ribbon, and honor the work of local organizations like Option Ressources Travail, who will be handing out free roses in various areas and various grocery stores. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Madam Speaker, tomorrow Hamilton will host its 53rd Vanier Cup, and I'm announcing today in this House that Laval Rouge et Or will probably win its 10th Vanier Cup. Madam Speaker, the Laval Rouge et Or is an institution in Quebec and the terror of all from one ocean to the other. Why? Over its 22 years in existence, they have played 11 times in the Vanier Cup game. 14 Dunsmore Cups, 140 victories and barely 39 losses. No one can beat their record, Madam Speaker. Under Glenn Constantin, their coach, and with the excellent quarterback, Hugo Richard, we're ready. Now, I've heard that the opposing team is just as tough. Western Mustangs scored 222 points, apparently, over the last 3 games. So not bad. But, Madam Speaker, one thing is certain, is that tomorrow will be an extraordinary match because there will be 96 young Canadians who will give their best and who will determine which will be the best team. Go Rouge et Or.
The honour member for Don Valley East.
Madam Speaker, today Canadians woke up to truly horrifying news from Egypt. A bomb and gun attack on a mosque in northern Sinai has left at least 180 people dead and dozens more injured. This callous and appalling attack took place just as prayers at the mosques were ending. All members of this House can agree that worshippers should always feel safe to practice their religion. Nobody should fear for their lives. We offer our sincere condolences to those mourning the loss of family members and friends. We also send our wishes for full recovery to those who were injured. To the people of Egypt, please know that Canadians stand with you during this terrible time. Such violence can never be tolerated. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions. L'honorable député de Carleton.
The honourable member for Carleton.
Liberals promised in the last election that if they became government, the rich would pay more. In fact, the financial report provided by this government for the 2016-17 tax year shows that the wealthiest Canadians paid $1.2 billion less in income tax as a result of the measures that this government instituted. In fact, it says that high-income individuals aim to recognize income in the 2015 tax year before the new 33% tax rate came into effect. What kind of tax strategies did these wealthy Canadians use to declare that income a year earlier?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Strategy that we've put forward to reduce inequalities in this country and to make sure the middle class has more money is to increase taxes on the wealthiest 1%, to lower them for 9 million Canadians, a measure, Madam Speaker, they voted against. We came forward with the Canada Child Benefit that's lifting 300,000 kids out of poverty in this country, reducing child poverty by 40%, a measure, Madam Speaker, they voted against. And what we've done also is look back at measures that they had put forward, such as doubling the TFSA limit or income splitting for families, which we know benefited to the 5-10% of wealthiest Canadians.
The honourable for Carleton.
On December 7th, 2015, the markets learned that at the end of that year, the rate of taxation on highest earners would go up to 33%. As a result, many started to sell their shares before the rate went up so that their capital gains would be realized before the change in the tax rate. As a result, in the week following that December 7th announcement, the stock market dropped by 5%. Did the finance minister anticipate this reaction?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, as I mentioned, we're working to make sure that Canadian businesses have everything they need to succeed. Canadian entrepreneurs are at the basis of our economic growth. That's why we announced a tax cut for SMEs down to 9%. Our economy is growing, something that they did not accomplish in 10 years. We have the strongest growth in the G7, 500,000 jobs created. This is an environment that is good for the prosperity of entrepreneurs from coast to coast, and that's what we're focusing on. The Honourable Member for Carleton.
On the stock market was to sell their shares after the December 7th announcement that this minister made in order to realize any capital gains in the 2015 year before the tax rate went up. As a result, the stock market in Canada dropped 5% subsequent to the minister's announcement on December 7th. I ask again, did the finance minister anticipate that the markets would react in this way to his December 7th announcement?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Madam Speaker. What Canadians were expecting from the previous government was slower growth, the highest unemployment rate since the Second World War. This was a government.
Growth in employment was the slowest job creation since World War II. Quand notre gouvernement est arrivé au pouvoir,
When our government took power, we invested in infrastructure, supported our entrepreneurs in order to make sure that we had growth, to ensure that there is a good climate for investment, for businesses, for prosperity. That's what we wanted to do. That's what we're going to keep doing. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Madam Speaker, in our political system, the Minister of Finance is the most important figure in Cabinet after the Prime Minister. That is why the Minister of Finance needs to be above all suspicion, because he is very important and Canadians want to trust him. Unfortunately, the current Minister of Finance is not meeting that criteria. We know that he's currently under investigation, that he paid a fine, and only acts when he's actually caught on something. Is the Minister of Finance finally going to be honest about his numbered companies? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleague for Louis Saint Laurent is a veteran parliamentarian who knows that we have institutions that preserve the integrity of Parliament. The Ethics Commissioner is the one who makes sure that all parliamentarians and ministers work in conformity with that integrity. She outlines the process to follow and makes sure that the rules that we follow in this House are applied. The Minister, as soon as he took power, worked full and transparently with the Ethics Commissioner, has always respected her recommendations, and is now even going even further. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Madam Speaker, if he had worked hand in hand with the Ethics Commissioner, why has he been found guilty and had to pay a fine? Why is he currently under investigation? Why did he decide to sell his shares 2 years after taking power? I'm going to ask if when the Minister of Finance is finally going to reveal all of his assets to Canadians. It's what they want to know. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, thank you. The Minister of Finance has always been open and honest with the Ethics Commissioner. As soon as he arrived in Ottawa, he set up a conflict of interest wall, which was working fine for the ministers of the Conservative government when they were in power. The minister is working with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that he's meeting all the expectations of ministers and parliamentarians.
Valley.
Madam Speaker, officers of Parliament work on behalf of all members of Parliament, not just the government and certainly not the Prime Minister's office. Yet 6 months after the Liberal failed attempt to appoint a Liberal as Language Commissioner, they're reusing the exact same broken process. They voted against the NDP proposal to fix this mess and are now sending us letters with one single name on it and calling it consultation. That's not consultation, that's a charade. So will the Liberals stop doing this? Will they work with Parliament so that we can hire the best watchdogs to work on all of our behalfs and on behalf of all Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Official languages are at the heart of who we are as Canadians, and we're committed to finding the best person for the important position of Official Languages Commissioner. Our government promised Canadians a rigorous, open and transparent merit-based process for public appointments, and we're keeping with that commitment. An announcement will be made in due course. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Madam Speaker, the Liberals promised an open and transparent process, but we have a closed, secretive process. 5 of 8 positions of officers of Parliament are open. We're talking about watchdogs that are serving all parliamentarians. We have no information on the Liberals' plan and their appointment process, and Canadians are being kept in the dark. However, we had offered them a fair, open, and transparent appointment process, but they decided to vote against it. Why did they break this promise?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, as we committed to Canadians, we do have a process that's open, transparent, and merit-based. All available positions are available online, and we always encourage Canadians to apply. What's interesting is that we endeavour to always work with all members in this place. We know that Canadians have a place. We know that officers of Parliament are independent, and we want to ensure that we pick the best people, and that's why we consider many different factors, and I encourage Canadians to consider applying. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Jonquière. Blah, blah, blah. Rhetoric, rhetoric. Where are the actions? This is very concerning. Canadians are not taking this matter lightly. The former Chief Electoral Officer, Jean-Pierre Kingsley, said today, and I quote, "These delays in making appointments are exasperating. It is a lack of democratic conscience from a government which I find unacceptable. A lack of conscience. Do the Liberals understand the consequences of their broken promise on our democracy?"
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, we will always endeavour to work in the best interest of all Canadians, and that's why this government has taken historic levels of consultations. Every member of Parliament is here to represent the best interests of their constituents, and we appreciate hearing the diversity of those voices. When it comes to our appointment process, it is an open, transparent, merit-based appointment process. Available positions are online, and I encourage Canadians to apply. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Skeena Bulkley Valley.
So let me get this. When Liberals say their process is open, they mean closed. And when they say it's transparent, they actually mean it's opaque. Just trust us doesn't cut it when it comes to Liberals, because when they go it alone, have you all noticed, things tend to go badly. When they try to appoint a Liberal partisan as a language commissioner, it blew up. Their spectacularly bad and expensive mydemocracy.ca fiasco and their $5.5 million backyard rink come to mind. So the ethics commissioner is not only on her 3rd extension under this government, she's also investigating the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. So stop this mess. Work with all parties to do this right, not the mess that they create.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, the member has been in this place much longer than I and knows that we endeavour to always work with all members of Parliament, and that's why any constructive feedback is always welcome. We have introduced an open, transparent, merit-based process. We know that many Canadians have considered applying, but what it will take, Madam Speaker, is all members of Parliament wanting these institutions to be successful. Every single member of Parliament will need to go above and beyond, and all we hear from the opposition is criticisms rather than constructive ideas to make the system better. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Madam Speaker, it took 2 years for the Finance Minister to admit fault for his failure to disclose his directorship in the corporation that owns his French villa and its value. The Ethics Commissioner has fined him. Yesterday, the Liberals spent the day trying to justify the illegal actions of the Finance Minister. It's clear that Canadians have lost trust and faith in this Finance Minister's ability to do his job. Is justifying illegal activity and poor judgment the new standard of these Ottawa Liberals?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Faith in the ability of anyone doing their job. The Canadians lost faith in the Conservatives' ability to do their jobs when it came to managing the economy. That's why they voted them out. And in fact, they were right, because they mismanaged the economy for 10 years. And our Finance Minister, Madam Speaker, has managed to create 500,000 jobs, 500,000 jobs since the last 2 years. Most of them full-time, has generated the best growth in the G7, meanwhile reducing inequalities. That's all things they were never able to achieve. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I just want to remind the members of the opposition to please allow the speakers that are up to speak. I'm sure you want to hear the answer so that you can ask the next question. The honourable member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Madam Speaker, the only assets the Finance Minister grew were his own and on a commission too. So uncovering what assets the Finance Minister holds has been an ethics riddle that we haven't been able to figure out. So riddle me this, Madam Speaker. We're exempt from tax hikes of the everyday sort. You won't find us in a parliamentary disclosure report. What are we? Why? We're the Finance Minister's private holdings, of course. Madam Speaker, will the Finance Minister help us solve this ethics riddle and tell us what's in those private holdings?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member knows, we have in this place institutions which are there to safeguard the integrity of Parliament. We trust the Ethics Commissioner's ability and impartiality to do her job. That's why the Finance Minister, when he arrived in Ottawa, disclosed his assets to the Ethics Commissioner, worked with her to make sure that all rules are followed. She recommended putting in place a conflict of interest screen, which she deemed to be the best measure of compliance possible. That has been in place since the very beginning, and the Finance Minister will continue to work with the Ethics Commissioner.
Honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. What's expected of all members is that they act with transparency and not hide behind the Ethics Commissioner by hoping to find a way to game the system. It took 2 years, the media, and a fine for the Minister of Finance to set up an ethical wall which shelters him from the regard of 35 million Canadians. The wall is full of holes when it comes to conflicts of interest. Why is the Minister of Finance waiting to bring down that wall and shed light on his other numbered companies? The Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, after years we saw the Conservatives undermine Parliament's institutions. I'm not surprised to see the member for the opposition attacking what the Ethics Commissioner considered to be the best measure of compliance. On this side, we believe in our parliamentary institutions, we believe in the Ethics Commissioner, and the Minister of Finance from the very beginning will, as he has from the very beginning, will continue to work with the Ethics Commissioner. The member for Mégantic-L'Érable. A rich businessman wants to change legislation to make himself wealthier. He implemented Bill C-27, and he made money. The Ethics Commissioner and the opposition protested. He sold his shares. He took the profits, and he's going to get a great tax break. The Minister of Finance has lost the trust of Canadians. When is he going to come back to earth and shed light on all of his financial affairs? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I mentioned several times, the institution responsible for making sure that the ethics are respected in this place, which is expected of all members and ministers, is to work with the Ethics Commissioner. The Minister of Finance did so. He even went further by setting all of his assets into a blind trust. He sold all his shares in Morneau Chapelle. And he is going to continue to work with Canadians, which has been doing well for the last 2 years, as we've observed lower inequality, phenomenal growth, and the implementation of the child tax benefit, which has benefited many families.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals keep blaming the Ethics Commissioner when they break the rules. They say she's there to safeguard the integrity of this House, but I think Canadians send MPs here to always stand up for their best interests, trusting we all know how to follow the rules and that we're ethical. Instead, the Finance Minister designed Bill C-27, which will enrich his billion-dollar family business. He's now one of 3 Liberals, including the Prime Minister, under investigation by the Ethics Commissioner. So my question is simple. Do the Liberals actually know the difference between right and wrong?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, the difference between right and wrong, I asked my question about the Harper Conservatives for 10 years, whether they knew what that difference was. When they doubled the TFSA limit that benefited to the 3% the wealthiest, when they scrapped our environmental protections laws in this country, when they disrespected institutions of this Parliament, Madam Speaker, and when they disrespected the Supreme Court, that's a question Canadians ask themselves every day about the previous Harper Conservatives. On this side, the Finance Minister, as well as our government, has worked in the best interests of Canadians, reducing taxes for 9 million Canadians, reducing inequalities in this country, and we're proud of that record, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Madam Speaker, the Minister claims the ethics screen counselled by the Ethics Commissioner prevented him from breaking the rules, but obviously that's not true because the Ethics Commissioner fined the Minister for breaking the rules. The screen is supposed to block the minister from meetings or discussions that could be a conflict. But guess who the minister himself picked to administer the screen? His chief of staff, his most senior, closest, and political assistant, who is hired by the minister, reports to the minister, and can be fired by the minister. Can the Liberals not even see the conflicts within their own conflicts?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I mentioned, I'm not surprised to see the Conservatives question the judgment of the Ethics Commissioner, who is doing her work in full impartiality and independence, who recommended the implementation of a conflict of interest wall, which was considered to be the best measure of compliance. This was a measure that was fine for the Conservative ministers at the time. The Ethics Commissioner recommended this to be the best measure of compliance, and on this side, we work with the Ethics Commissioner. We will always continue to do so. It's what the Minister of Finance has done and will always continue to do.
Fanshawe.
Madam Speaker, no veteran should ever be homeless, yet thousands are currently at risk. According to their new national housing strategy, the Liberals don't seem to think this problem deserves to be taken seriously. Their so-called strategy makes only passing reference to homeless veterans. Even worse, affordable housing is postponed till after 2019. How many decades will it take before this government finally acts and addresses the needs of veterans? Madam Speaker, we are in the midst of a crisis. We need a homeless strategy now.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Now, and let's compare what the NDP promised and what the Liberals are now delivering. The NDP in the last election promised to repair 50,000 units of housing. We're going to do 300,000 units. In terms of providing the operating agreements, the NDP was going to renew 365,000. We're doing 385,000 operating agreements. Let's talk about new housing. The NDP promised 10,000 units over 4 years. We're doing 100,000 over 10 years. And when it comes to new subsidies, 0 from the NDP, 300,000 from this party. If you're going to call something timid, I'm going to call something meek. That was meek. And
Once again, I would like to remind the members to listen to the questions so that the next question they'll be able to decide what they want to ask on the next question. So please afford that respect to the people who are speaking. The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This week, the Prime Minister said one person experiencing homelessness in Canada is one too many. But the government has announced it hopes to cut chronic homelessness in Canada by 50% within 10 years. What will the government do about the other 50% who will still be homeless in 10 years? Will the government support my motion to create a plan to help all people experiencing homelessness, or are they satisfied leaving half the population out in the cold?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children
the Prime Minister was very clear. One homeless person is one homeless person too many. And we have a strategy, a $40 billion strategy over the next 10 years that is going to reduce chronic homelessness, episodic homelessness, and the vulnerabilities that people find themselves in across this country. The new Canada Housing Benefit is going to address 300,000 people and prevent people from swelling the ranks of the homeless. We have a strategy which we doubled in our first year, a $2.2 billion strategy that's been reprofiled in consultation with people with lived experiences, community organizations, municipalities, provinces, and territories. We will attack this issue, and if we can do better than half, we will do everything in our power to achieve that.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, the media have reported that the Liberal Party of Canada's bagman has financial interests in tax havens. The Liberal government is asking Canadians to shoulder an ever greater tax burden while its influential friends are getting a free ride in those tax havens. After these new revelations, is the Prime Minister still satisfied with the situation, or is he going to continue to protect his billionaire friend of the Liberal family? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. My colleague knows full well that I will not comment on any individual cases, not today, tomorrow, not next year, or ever. The law forbids me from doing so. I want to reassure my colleague that no one is interfering in the agency's investigations, and as long as I will be Minister of National Revenue, it will never happen. Let us be clear, no one is above the law. And as Minister, I work every day to make sure that the law is applied.
Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Madam Speaker, the Liberal Party's chief fundraiser, Stephen Bronfman, denied links to offshore tax havens after 1998. However, documents show that Bronfman family companies were still owed millions from their trust in the Cayman Islands in 2005. The Prime Minister doesn't seem concerned that his friend has apparently misled him, and he certainly seems fine with the fact that his millionaire Liberal cronies have been cheating Canada. Is the Prime Minister still satisfied with his friend's version of the facts, despite very clear evidence to the contrary?
The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Madam Speaker, as my colleague knows very well, I will not comment an individual case, not today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next year, not ever. The law forbids me from doing so. I want to reassure my colleague that no one is interfering in the agency's files or its audits. As long as I am Minister of National Revenue, the law will be applied. Let us be clear, no one is above the law. And as Minister, I work every day to make sure that the law is upheld and that it protects Canada's tax system.
Madam Speaker, the Foreign Affairs Minister's August speech outlined Canada's progressive agenda for NAFTA, but now it seems that Canada's agenda is leading to deadlock at the negotiation table. Even Ontario's Premier is worried about the failure of NAFTA. So in response to the deadlock, Canada has quietly begun telling our stakeholders that all the Canadian proposals will be non-binding. Will the minister admit to this House that they've been telling NAFTA stakeholders that Canada's progressive priorities will not be binding on the United States or Mexico?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Madam Speaker, our negotiating position is clear, and we will defend and maintain the elements of NAFTA that Canadians know are essential to our national interest. We are negotiating in good faith with our partners, but we cannot and will not accept proposals that put Canadian jobs at risk and do harm to our economy. And by the way, Madam Speaker, I'd just like to add, in terms of jobs, this government has added 500,000 jobs in the last 2 years, and our GDP is the best of all of the G7. We will always defend Canadians' national interest and Canadian values. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Durham.
Well, Madam Speaker, moving from the sublime to the ridiculous, I don't need to remind this House that the Castro family has murdered thousands of people. They have denied the Cuban people fundamental democratic rights and freedoms. They've persecuted gays and lesbians for their sexual orientation. So does the Prime Minister seriously believe that he should team up with the Castros to negotiate on nuclear weapons with North Korea?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Foreign Affairs.
Madam Speaker, we are certainly following the situation in North Korea and the provocative actions coming out of that region. Let me be clear, the member opposite should know full well by now that this government sees human rights as foundational in all of our international engagements. We will ensure to continue to espouse human rights in any and all relationships, including rule of law and pacifism around the world. We remain concerned with the situation in North Korea, and certainly our minister is monitoring that closely. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Loire. For too long, jurisdictional gaps have left coastal communities dealing with abandoned vessels with nowhere to turn for help. In my riding, there are many environmental concerns around the Catherine Spirit. We're talking about many tons of hazardous materials and contaminated water. The Liberal Bill C-64 doesn't tackle the massive delay concerning abandoned vessels in coastal communities. Will the Liberals finally work with these communities and with the NDP by debating Bill C-352 in order to fix the gaps in their own bill?
The Honourable Minister, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. We know that protecting our oceans is absolutely essential, and that's why we introduced the Oceans Protection Plan. We've also, as a part of that Oceans Protection Plan, introduced Wrecked, Abandoned, or Hazardous Vessels Act. Now, this is a long-term, comprehensive, integrated plan to address the issue, and Canadians deserve no less. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
After the Liberals blocked my bill on abandoned vessels, I launched an historic appeal, allowing MPs to decide themselves if it should be debated. It should, because it's built on solutions proposed by coastal communities, which fill gaps in the government's bill C-64.
That's right.
We've got hundreds of signatures in support of my bill, and this week the Mayor of Ladysmith wrote directly to the Prime Minister urging him to allow debate. Why is this government blocking my legislation, and why is it stifling coastal voices?
The Honourable Minister, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Madam Speaker, and as I've already mentioned, this is what Canadians expect a government to do, is to come out with legislation that is comprehensive, long-term, integrated, multi-jurisdictional, negotiated, and that's exactly what we're doing. We look forward to the opportunity, the determination of the House next week, but Madam Speaker, make no doubt, we're serious about making this happen.
Hear, hear. Honourable Member for Hull Aylmer. Madam Speaker, this weekend, the 105th Grey Cup will be held right here in Ottawa, in the region of the National Capital Region. Toronto will go head-to-head with Calgary in a game that we hope will be just as exciting as last year's game was.
Several thousand young people from across the country will watch on TV, see some of the best athletes competing. Can the Minister of Sport and Persons with Disabilities tell us about the inspiration these events provide to young people?
The Honourable Minister for Sports and Disabilities.
For 105 years, CFL athletes have been inspiring our kids to participate in sports. Kids have dreamed of emulating their CFL heroes, from Jackie Parker to John Cornish, from Bruce Covington to Ricky Ray, from Dave Sapunjas to S.J. Gree. And this is important because we want kids to live active, healthy lives and, of course, to dream big and be proud of who we are. I'm proud of our CFL athletes, teams, and organizations, but on Sunday, Madam Speaker, I will be cheering for my hometown, Calgary Stampeders. Go Stamps, go!
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Yesterday, the minister said that the number of ISIS fighters in Canada that he's been citing is essentially accurate. Well, being essentially accurate isn't going to keep Canadians safe or bring justice to the victims of these criminals. So I'll ask him once again, how can the minister claim to be surveilling all ISIS fighters in Canada if he's using 2-year-old data? Or is he claiming that no new terrorists have entered Canada in the last 2 years? Or is he admitting that there are terrorists that he is no longer watching?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I'm interested in the honourable member's views, but there are other views. And last night in the media, security expert and former CSIS officer Phil Gursky said this, quote, "The previous government had an abysmal record when it came to countering violent extremism and early detection. The Conservative government didn't care," end of quote. Dr. Lorne Dawson from the University of Waterloo said the previous Conservative government had little or no interest in following up on this, so Canada is late. They also, Madam Speaker, cut $1 billion from the security services of Canada.
Again, I remind the members that they should be listening to the question, and they could end up losing a question if it's taking too much time. So I would assume that in order to ask the next question, they would like to know what the answer was. The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, Madam Speaker, here's the fact. It was our Conservative government that passed the laws that will allow these criminals to be punished. It's the $300 million that we directed to counter terrorism that's helping law enforcement officials do their jobs today. By contrast, this government's response to these terrorists has been to weaken these laws, provide funding for integration support for these criminals, and hide their numbers from Canadians. He's dancing, Madam Speaker. Why won't the minister tell Canadians how many ISIS fighters have returned to Canada in the last 2 years, and how many are under 24-hour surveillance?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the numbers have indeed been published already. Canada works constantly with all of our allies, the Five Eyes, G7, Interpol and others, to know as much as we possibly can about every threat. Our Canadian agencies constantly assess and reassess all the data to be effective and current in keeping Canadians safe, and they respond with a full suite of measures: investigations, surveillance, marshalling evidence, lifting passports, no-fly lists, threat reduction initiatives, and criminal proceedings, Madam Speaker, wherever that is possible.
The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
To be following and watching terrorists. They also claim to support and respect the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, but the Liberals are cutting the pay of our brave soldiers who have served in some of the most dangerous missions in the world, while at the same time pandering to Canadian ISIS terrorists by giving them, Madam Speaker, taxpayer-funded reintegration programs. Why are the Liberals choosing Canadian terrorists over the brave women and men who have fought against them?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence. Madam Speaker, Canada has been a part of the fight against the Islamic State. We have worked with the Iraqis and mainly the Kurds to defend Mosul and to reestablish peace in that region. We also want to ensure stability there through our actions. We are also present in ensuring the stabilization of the region through different actions. The Honourable Member for Bhopal-Limoilou. Madam Speaker, my colleague didn't talk about the fight against ISIS. He was talking about our government's treatment for our currently serving soldiers. They're turning their backs to our veterans and threatening to cut the monthly service benefit for wounded soldiers as we speak. The Liberals are proposing a state-funded assistance program for radicalized terrorists, and they won't even offer this type of services to law-abiding Canadian citizens. Madam Speaker, why should terrorists who fought against our country be entitled to free reintegration services when the Liberals are abandoning our own wounded soldiers? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I need to correct my colleague across the way. It's not correct to say that there were cuts or cuts to their benefits or income. We recently increased benefits by 5%, and we are allowing a grace period of 6 months to wounded soldiers to help them get back to health. We think that with this 6-month grace period, we are already very much helping them transition back to their period of normal income.
Member for Kootenay, Columbia.
Last week, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature called Wood Buffalo National Park one of the most threatened World Heritage Sites in North America. They affirmed what UNESCO has already found. Canada's largest national park is threatened by federal government neglect and resource development. UNESCO gave the government until February 2018 to respond to their report, but with the deadline approaching, Canadians have not heard anything. This is a black eye for Canada on the world stage. What will the government do to save this critically important park?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
For his question and for his advocacy on parks and protected areas. We understand the importance of protecting Wood Buffalo National Park, and we welcome the review by UNESCO. We are working very hard, including with the Indigenous communities within the park, and we will continue to do so.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Madam Speaker, the Minister of National Revenue is trying to blame the Conservatives for the disastrous evaluation her agency got from the Auditor General. She says that staff cuts were to blame, but after 2 years she hasn't done anything about that. When half of the calls to the CRA don't get through, and 30% of callers are given bad information, it seems obvious to me that in-person services need to be restored to rural areas. When will she finally realize that nothing is more effective than in-person service? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. We agree with all of the Auditor General's recommendations. The Conservative government before us chose to cut these services available to Canadians by cutting funding to call centres. Under the former Minister Finlay, they reduced the number of staff in centres, they reduced operating hours, and reduced service standards. Rather than cutting, we have chosen to reinvest $50 million over the next 4 years. I will continue to work to ensure that the agency treats Canadians like important customers instead of simple taxpayers, as is written in my mandate letter.
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Madam Speaker, we're standing 2 blocks away from the longest skating rink in the world. 4 blocks away at City Hall, they have a lovely outdoor facility. However, this government sees nothing wrong with spending $5.6 million for a temporary rink on Parliament Hill. Works out to about $300 taxpayer dollars per spin. Now we hear it's going to go be rebuilt in Ottawa. Will the minister at least commit to sending this rink to a community in the north where the season is long and the need is great?
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Of course, we're really delighted with this new project. If my colleague would have listened to what I've said in the past, actually, this rink will be given to a community in need afterwards. Meanwhile, Canadians will have until February to really enjoy the great winterlude and also this important infrastructure. And I really hope I'll have the chance to go on the ice, enjoy ice skating with her, because this is a great way to celebrate Canada Win 50. Thank you.
I know that it's Friday and the day is going to end pretty soon, but again, I would just ask people to restrain themselves just a little while longer. The Honourable Member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Madam Speaker, it's been 2 years since the Minister gutted the Financial Transparency Act for First Nations. Now Harrison Thunderchild has reluctantly taken his leadership in the community to court around their lack of disclosure. He told the National Post every level of government has that expectation to be transparent and accountable. First Nations should not be different. The Minister promised a new system 2 years ago. When is she going to deliver?
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous Services.
Colleague for the question. I hope my colleague has recognized that we are on a journey of reconciliation. Our renewed relationship with Indigenous peoples is based on a recognition of rights, respect, cooperation and partnership. It's in that context that we are doing work to establish a new fiscal relationship with Indigenous peoples. We are consulting in terms of how we can develop better systems of mutual accountability, and I would be happy to hear any recommendations to that end.
Excuse me. The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Well, in response to the Minister treating Canadians like important customers, this government has failed a hard-working public servant in my riding of Yorkton Melville. Last spring, out of the blue, Phoenix cut her pay by $500 a month. Whoa. What was she told when she called the Pay Centre helpline? Your call is important to us. If you've received an overpayment, press 1. If you have a concern about your T4, press 2. For all other inquiries, press 3. Can the Minister please explain why was "if we owe you money" not priority number 1?
Exactly.
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is the number 1 priority for me. Getting people paid on time and properly is indeed my primary focus. And Madam Speaker, we are taking steps that the previous government simply didn't take. It was their irresponsibility that put us in this situation. We are improving our government, including improving our training. We are... Sorry.
Yeah, order. Again, I must ask people to restrain themselves just a little bit longer. Allow the Minister to finish her response. The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, we have put in place emergency pay services. We are working with every level within all of our departments. Quite frankly, Madam Speaker, this will be solved for public servants by public servants. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Mississauga, Streetsville.
Madam Speaker, an estimated 1 in 3 women will experience some form of sexual violence in her lifetime. Gender-based violence has a devastating impact on individuals, families, and communities. Recent high-profile events continue to shine a light on the immediate need for activism. November 25th will mark the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, and the first of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Can the Minister inform this House how we can all get involved and show our support?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Status of Women.
I want to thank my colleague from Mississauga Streetsville for his advocacy, Madam Speaker. During the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, we reflect on the causes and costs of gender-based violence. This year's theme, My Actions Matter, is a call to action to take concrete steps to recognize, to call out, and speak up against acts of gender-based violence. We are proud of partnering with the CFL to promote anti-violence measures at the 105th Grey Cup right here in Ottawa, and I encourage everyone to join them and take a pledge to end gender-based violence. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Banff Airdrie.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals seem confused about how rules work. They seem to penalise those who follow them and reward those who break them. Recently, a constituent lost her landed immigrant card and needed to get travel within a few days, and so she needed to contact the government for a replacement card, but was told that it would take at least a month to replace it and that there was no way to expedite the process. Meanwhile, those who are illegally crossing the border into Canada are getting expedited work permits. So, Madam Speaker, why are the Liberals punishing those who follow the rules and rewarding those who don't?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, the question had many aspects to it. Now, if the member is talking about a particular case, he knows that I can't comment on it. But if the member across the way is talking generally about asylum requests at the border, I can say that we are convinced that it's important to raise awareness in the U.S. to ensure that people know that the rules that we have in Canada need to be respected. Madam Speaker, I would be pleased to discuss with him that particular case later.
Mississauga Lakeshore.
Madam Speaker, our government has announced a national housing strategy which will lead to real transformative change. By enshrining the right to housing for all Canadians in this strategy, the government is taking the lead in reducing homelessness and poverty.
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development share with this House how seniors, like those in my riding of Mississauga Lakeshore who are advocating for more affordable housing, will benefit from this new strategy.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development.
Madam Speaker, I can attest to the first-hand witnessing I've seen of this member from Mississauga Lakeshore's commitment to seniors and seniors housing. I attended a massive town hall with him as part of the consultations that led to the rollout of the National Housing Strategy. The part of the National Housing Strategy I think it speaks most strongly to the issue he's raised around seniors is the new Canada Housing Benefit. It will allow us to help seniors age in place with dignity. It allowed us to target seniors in particular for support and make sure that their lives are conducted with dignity and support. It also builds on the CPP reforms and GIS reforms that we put in place. Seniors matters, housing matters, and that members' work on this has been absolutely fantastic.
The honourable member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Canada's Fundamental Science Review was delivered to this Liberal government over 7 months ago. The Naylor Report review outlines 35 recommendations. When asked about these by the science community, the Science Minister has no clear answer and simply says they're working on it. It's been 229 days now, so just working on it won't cut it, Madam Speaker. Simple question to the Minister. Can she tell Canadians when these recommendations will be implemented?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Science.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, after a decade of neglect, our government is working to restore Canadian science. We started by unmuzzling our scientists and then made historic investments, including $2 billion in research infrastructure and the largest investment in fundamental science in a decade. Now we're taking action on fundamental science review recommendations and launching the Canada Research Coordinating Committee to improve coordination of the granting councils and capping the Tier 1 renewals for the Canada Research Chairs to ensure new opportunities for young researchers.
The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Madam Speaker, flight attendants are concerned about the decision to allow small knives on airplanes. They've been clear with the Minister of Transport. They've said this change goes too far, it puts flight attendants and the public in danger. The ICAO doesn't require the harmonization of rules concerning high-risk items. So why allow pocket knives in planes when they can be checked in the hold? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Dozens of other countries have adopted the same measures that we have. Passenger safety is a serious issue for all of us. These countries include France, Great Britain, Germany, New Zealand, Italy, Russia, Iceland, Ireland, Spain, Austria, Hungary, Greece, Belgium, and others. We all care about passenger safety.
Madame la Présidente.
Honourable Member for Montcalm. 163 people at the Davie shipyard lost their jobs yesterday because the government isn't doing its job. That's 163 jobs lost and 350 more under threat next week, and it's only a month until Christmas. This is this government's fault because this government continues to cheat Quebecers out of shipbuilding contracts. Will the government finally take action and award Davy a second contract for a replenishment vessel? This is getting urgent.
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government is always concerned by the consequences of job losses for workers and their families. We recognize the important work done by the Davy workers. Our government has been in contact with the head of the Davy shipyard, as well as unions and the Quebec government. Our national shipbuilding strategy has allocated $2 billion for various contracts, and the Davy shipyard is eligible for those bids. Our government does not plan on buying another replenishment vessel.
Le député de Montcalm.
The honourable member from Montcalm. Well, the government is concerned, but it's not taking action. Madam Speaker, the employment insurance program is completely disconnected from the needs of seasonal workers. So much so that when things go well and the unemployment rate goes down, things actually get worse for seasonal workers in regions. The Prime Minister was elected on a promise to solve the problems with the EI system. He did it for oil workers in the West, so what's he waiting for to keep his promise to seasonal workers in Quebec? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the question. I'm aware that seasonal workers may face difficult situations.
Addressing this issue, we are in consultation right now with employers, with workers, with municipalities, with jurisdictions that have coverage of this issue. We are consulting to make sure that a comprehensive response is possible. Seasonal workers and those who face difficulties, even as we create 500,000 jobs and face regional challenges, are front of mind of this government, in particular the Minister who is addressing this issue with his counterparts in the province.
The honourable member for Nunavut.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. While traveling my riding, constituents express concern about carbon pricing and how it will increase our already high cost of living. The Minister is aware that Nunavut is totally reliant on fossil fuels. Despite this, Madam Speaker, Nunavut's carbon footprint is only 1/10 of 1% of Canada's carbon footprint. The Government of Canada is committed to design a solution that accounts for our unique nature when developing carbon pricing exemptions and regulations. My question is, are there specific exemptions and regulations being developed for Nunavut? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Nakulmik to the member of Nunavut for his question, and thank you for his advocacy on behalf of Nunavummiut. We know that Northerners are on the front lines of climate change. I saw this directly when I was in the high Arctic this summer. I heard of Inuit going through, hunters falling through the ice because they can no longer tell the thickness of the ice. Our climate plan understands that we need to be working with Northerners, that we need to develop unique situations. We're committed to working with our partners in the North on carbon pricing, and I'm happy to say that we're sharing results of a study that we've conducted right now.
Unfortunately, the time is up. Point
of order, the Honourable Member for Montcalm. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask unanimous consent of the House to adopt the following motion. That this House call on the government to review its method of calculating eligibility for employment insurance benefits in order to better meet the needs of working men and women who have seasonal jobs. These are important jobs for the regional economies in Quebec. Does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to propose the motion? No, there is no unanimous consent.
The honourable member for Durham has a point of order. Point of privilege.
And it relates to the comments made by the MP from Skeena-Bulkley Valley today, who reminded this House that the government is about to appoint an official languages commissioner, Madam Speaker. And I'd refer you to my point raised on May 31st in this House and talked about again on June 6th. And I've yet to receive a decision from the chair with respect to that point of privilege for